Welcome back to the Vermont Lieutenant Governor debate, live from the Echo Leahy Center for Lake Champlain.
Welcome back, and let's get right back into it. Mr. Brock, you suggested recently that Mr. Zuckerman might not be trustworthy in the role of Lieutenant Governor. Please tell us what you mean by that.
Well, I mean a record that is very concerning in several areas. In particular, there was an article in 7 Days a number of years ago in which David mentioned that he billed the state for mileage to and from Montpelier on days in which he carpooled and rode for others, thereby getting income that he himself said that he probably shouldn't do it and didn't deserve it. At the time the article was written, he went on to justify that by saying that, well, as a legislator, he wasn't really paid a great deal and therefore felt justified in doing it. Only this year, once we're in the midst of a lieutenant gubernatorial campaign, did he raise the issue, well, the legislative council told him that it was okay to do that, and he did it. At that time, we certainly knew that things like meal expenses that legislators got were flat rate. However, mileage was put in based on the number of miles that you actually went back and forth to work. And at that time, that was something that I did. I think that that may be an indication, and that's one of several, that raise serious issues about judgment and character.
Mr. Zuckerman?
Sure, thank you. I think actually judgment and character is very important, and how that was just portrayed by my opponent is actually inaccurate and intentionally misleading. When I was a legislator in the House, like all legislators, we were instructed to write down how far we lived from the State House according to the law and practice, and we all did that just as we do with meals, just as we do with room allowance, as my opponent, who was in the same article, happily admitted when he got $20 bills for meals, he got the full $50 to $60 for the meal allowance. They all three were allowances. Now actually, because I brought the issue up at the State House and brought it to the attention of the media, we actually have reformed that system in these last 4 years with a system where you enter in the actual miles driven. But the law itself was very clear. Legislators of all political parties followed the law, including myself. And that's one more instance where my opponent has actually skewed reality in his attack ads against me versus the law or versus the practice.
Mr. Zuckerman, drug addiction and the opiate problem. Is there anything that you can think of that Vermont should be doing to combat addiction that it's not already?
Well, there's no doubt this is really one of the biggest challenges we face. As Attorney General candidate T.J. Donovan says, name another health crisis or health circumstance where we make you wait 3 months or 4 months or 6 months for treatment. This is an abomination. We do not fund treatment of heroin addicts in the ways that we should. We should be giving people a second chance. People are getting onto opiates because of our prescription drug formulas and the fact that folks get onto them for pain and can't get off. Now again, my opponent and I disagree on cannabis. If it's going to happen someday anyway, let's do it right, and let's have money for treatment for our opiate addicts so we can get them back into being productive members of society. There is no doubt, we've learned that you need longer treatment, typically inpatient treatment for many individuals, and or better counseling and various other treatment methods, and we do not fully fund it. Were we to reform our cannabis laws, the first dollars would go towards prevention for youth and treatment for our opiate addicts.
Thank you, Mr. Brock.
We need to do more to treat opiate addiction. We should start treating with prevention, and the best prevention is an effective jobs and the economy strategy to prevent people from getting that loss of hope that in some cases leads to the problem in the first place. The notion of cannabis being the solution to our heroin problem I think is patently absurd. One, because as I've mentioned before, the money is not there economically, it doesn't work. But beyond that, to say that we're going to legalize cannabis in order to treat heroin addiction is akin to using gasoline to try to put out a fire. It doesn't work, it makes no sense, the money will not be there in the amount necessary. That being said, we also need better accountability in what we do. There is a absolute lack of consistency of treatment for opiate addiction throughout the state, and there is a lack of follow-up to ensure that what treatment we give actually works. We need better accountability for what we do, and that will help us devise a program and a process for doing the right thing for the most number of people.
I would just add that in Colorado, opiate use is down since they legalized cannabis and regulated it.
Let's turn to education. The number that gets thrown out a lot is that Vermont taxpayers spend well over $1.5 billion on K through 12 education, and that number is rising each and every year, even as the number of school kids keeps falling. Meantime, we're dead in support for higher education when it comes to college and it being out of reach for high school graduates, the cost of being out of reach. Mr. Brock, let's start with you. What's the answer to the education problem and the spending problem?
Well, the answer is we have to look at K through 12 education and how and why we are such an outlier in the United States. Now, I know that we have lots of small schools. I know that we have a rural and dispersed population, but we're not the only state who has that situation, and we're not the only state who achieves reasonably good educational results despite that. I think we need to look at the consistency, particularly associated with that big elephant in the room, and that is the amount of educational personnel, including teachers and particularly para-educators that we have in our school system, and why it's so grossly different from the rest of the United States. And indeed, even within Vermont, there's significant inconsistencies, particularly in the use of para-educators in support of special education. We have some schools in Vermont that do remarkably well, and they're not necessarily the big consolidated schools, and who deliver education in a quality fashion at a much lower rate. I think we need to look at what we're doing, and in particular, I think we need to look at the results of the PICUS study that have suggested that we can reduce our educational cost by at least 10%.
Mr. Zuckerman.
Well, I'd say, first of all, consolidating administration does not actually mean big schools, and I think that's another misnomer that's put out on a regular basis. And in fact, the PICUS report argues for making just a handful of large districts in order to save money. So I'm not sure that those two are compatible. I've been on the education committee for the last 4 years, and I've regularly been bringing up the issue that in our schools, our teachers and those paraeducators are serving in part as social workers for the various challenges that are coming into the schools due to family dynamics, economic discord that's happening in our society because people aren't getting paid well enough. What we should be doing is breaking down the barriers between the Human Services Agency and the Education Agency so we don't duplicate services. We can actually find both efficiency by bringing more human services personnel into our schools to do the human services side so that our teachers can be the inspiring folks that they went into teaching to be, so they can get our children excited about what their future can be. So we can both save money and have better outcomes by breaking down the barriers and the silos between different agencies and state government. Thank you.
Mr. Brock, let me just follow up what you said. Look at the number of teachers and paraeducators. Is what you're saying that there are too many folks in the classroom right now?
The ratio is, student-teacher ratio is the lowest in the entire United States by far. Having a slightly higher number of educators, of teachers, or excuse me, a slightly smaller number of teachers for the school population that we have is one way to reduce costs very dramatically without tremendously damaging and without damaging educational quality. Oftentimes, slightly larger classes, many studies have shown, actually result in better results because of a greater ability to interact between students in a classroom.
Do you want to follow up?
Well,
30 seconds.
You know, if we actually look at what the Act 46 goal is, it's actually to keep the small schools open, but address some of those issues. If you have two small schools, K through 8, with 4 or 5 kids per class, and they were actually one district instead of 2, you could have 8 kids per grade in a K through 4 and a 5 through 8. You would find both efficiency and you'd have better outcomes for our children. So actually, moving forward with Act 46, I think for the most part is a good thing. Granted, it does require some adjustments. We've clearly seen in some districts it's extremely hard for a choice district to merge in with others. And in our law, we actually allowed for unions, but we have to make adjustments to make sure that that's okay.
All right, Leanne Denyer, you're up next.
Ron Rowley from Northfield writes us on Facebook that he has a question about a different age group here in Vermont, our retirees. He wants to know, what are your plans to make it better for retirees in the state? Mr. Zuckerman.
Sure. Well, I think there's a couple major issues. It's been brought up with me all across the state that we're one of, I think, about 6 states that tax Social Security. Now, I've also learned that that's about a $30 million revenue source for the state, and we'd have to obviously figure out how to make up for that $30 million loss if we were to either reduce or eliminate the Social Security tax. But that's something I'm interested in looking at to see how we can shift the tax burden away from our struggling retirees in Vermont. Affordable housing is a huge issue, but I would also say let's go back to our schools. Why don't we make our schools into greater community centers where our seniors can also participate in our schools, whether it's food services, where we can actually be more efficient in getting food to some seniors who are struggling, but also use the wisdom and the mentorship of our seniors with our children. Let's bring our different generations closer together again. We've been stratifying for years, and I think there's real opportunities as community to come together and do more.
Thank you, Mr. Brock.
The issue of the use of elders and the involvement of senior citizens in schooling is something that has in fact been done and been done well in a number of locations throughout the United States. I think it's something that we certainly should look at. The issue of taxation, retirement benefits such as military retirement benefits in most states are not taxed, but they are in Vermont, and similarly Social Security. The key though is we need a tax reform that is not piecemeal. The danger of applying piecemeal tax solutions is we will wind up with a tax code very much like the one that we have right now. And we always have to remember that every benefit that we give to one group or to one individual or to one company raises taxes for everyone else. We need comprehensive tax reform in Vermont so that we have a property tax system that makes sense and that people actually understand. We made a lot of progress on reviewing our tax code with the Blue Ribbon Tax Commission a number of years ago, but we failed to add to it by doing the review of the property tax at the same time. That's something that we need to do overall in terms of reforming our tax code soon.
Mr. Zuckerman, you have been a staunch proponent of a single-payer healthcare system, which was abandoned by the current governor 2 years ago for its high cost. Would you push to resurrect it next year?
Well, let's remember, our current high cost of health care is out of control compared to most every other industrialized country in the world, most of whom have universal health care systems. So let's compare and contrast and look at what our long-term goal would be. But there's no way we're going to go to a single payer or a universal system in the next few years. We do need to look at how to broaden universal primary care or look at expanding Catamount 2.0 to expand the age under which people are eligible. These are ideas that are currently being studied by legislative groups and outside groups to see what their feasibility are and how we can make a more efficient healthcare system. Clearly, Vermont Health Connect is not working from an administration perspective. It was a step backwards for Vermont while a step forward for most of the country, but we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Here in Vermont, we have some of the best healthcare outcomes for mothers and children and families. In our last question, we talked about schools. We have the 4th highest outcomes for our elementary schools. We need to continue to move to stay at the forefront of support for our families, whether it be healthcare or education, and I look forward to continuing that discussion.
Mr. Brock.
The move toward single payer, which we were involved in for almost 3 years, coupled with the dysfunction that we see in Vermont Health Connect, has created such tremendous uncertainty throughout our state that it's affected our business environment in that companies did not want to expand or grow in Vermont because of the uncertainty, not knowing whether there might be an 18% payroll tax coming up down the road. Providers, we found great difficulty in getting medical doctors and particularly dentists to come to Vermont, again because of that uncertainty. We created an environment in which some physicians who were here looked for greener pastures elsewhere. Uncertainty is one of the grave dangers that this constant tinkering with healthcare has caused us. And the notion, because we have a problem, we have something that isn't working well, that a group can sit around a table and decide, well, we're going to upend 1/6 of our economy, we're going to do something entirely different. We're going to do something that no one in the United States has ever done before and expect that we're going to get positive results. That's what happens when we do things the way we do and the law of unintended consequences kicks in.
Thanks. Next question's for you, Mr. Zuckerman. When Mr. Brock was elected state auditor in 2004, he became the first African American ever elected to statewide office in our state. Over the course of this summer, a tough summer for race relations across our country, he took umbrage when it appeared that you suggested that the reaction you've received by wearing long hair was somehow comparable to the reaction that some black people face. Did he have a point?
Well, again, it's a misstatement of what I said. What I talked about in that VPR story is that we have to all look at our inherent biases. We've got it in our law enforcement. We all have individual biases, regardless of race or hair color, etc., with respect to stereotyping. I certainly never compared the two with respect to the consequences of those stereotypes. It's one more instance where what I said and what my opponent is claiming I've said are completely at odds with each other. There is no doubt Vermont has a 12.5 ratio of people of color in our law enforcement and in our correction system. We have a 10-to-1 ratio of arrests for people of color compared to people who are white. There are tremendous challenges in our law enforcement and in our inherent biases towards people of color in our state, and we need to address those issues. And my opponent said I politicized it. It is a real issue for people of color every day in this state, and it's something we have to address in politics because it's our policies that are creating some of these outcomes. I think it's appropriate and important to discuss.
Mr. Brock.
The St. Albans Messenger did an editorial in which they looked at what Mr. Zuckerman said, and I think they got it right, because they said that David basically appears to be someone who sees a crowd and then runs out to get in front of it to appear to be its leader. I've been in public life in Vermont for 12 years, and I've rarely even mentioned or raised the issue of race until right now because it was not relevant. In my mind, running for public office in Vermont as an African American is no more important than running as someone who has short hair or no hair or a size 12 shoe. It's not a relevant issue for discussion. But what Senator Zuckerman did was he said, let's have a party. Let's have a time in which we're going to discuss this important and serious issue of race with a good time and music. And he did so using a large poster, conspicuous with his picture, conspicuous with his campaign logo. And he held an event that in a place which he rented with his lawn signs, his stickers, etc., and then denied that he was the one who caused this to happen in the first place.
We got to give you a chance to rebut, David.
I worked with community of color members in Burlington and Chittenden County and said, what kind of event would you like to have? I think it's critically important not actually to run out in front, as my opponent has just said. I said, why don't we have an event where people of color simply express what's happening to them on a daily basis to those of us who are in elected office. I am currently a senator. There were other representatives and a prosecutor from Chittenden County there in attendance to hear people's experiences. Those individuals who organized that event, yes, with my campaign, but I said, do it the way you want. I said, yeah, these are very serious issues, but we also want to bring people in and not scare people away by only saying this is a big, hard discussion, don't come listen. They said, let's have music. Let's hear the music of the community, and I listened to them.
Let's turn back to education and Act 46. We've got 30 seconds each for you to answer this question. What would you make as far as changes to Act 46 if you're elected to Lieutenant Governor? And let's start with Mr. Zuckerman.
Well, there's a few changes that clearly need to be addressed. One is that in the Senate, we actually made it easier for communities to get together. We lowered the number from the House from 1,100 to 900 for the preferred district model. But we also said we need to allow unions to consolidate and remain as unions so that schools could keep their choice. What we didn't do, and we failed to recognize, was that you had to merge on either side of the equation, choice districts and non-choice districts to keep your union. We clearly need to address that so that some of these school districts that have worked together in the past can continue to work together under a consolidated union district without losing school choice for those communities.
Mr. Brock.
Choice, I think, is the big thing that needs to be fixed in Act 46. It is, I think, extremely important. It's important to have the possibility of having competition in education. Beyond that, I think that we need to determine whether or not there's sufficient flexibility in Act 46 for people to come up with different solutions other than the limited set of solutions offered in the law. One of the things that I'm proud of that I introduced as a member of the Education Committee that is still in law right now is something called virtual mergers. It can accomplish many of those same things while still retaining the structures that we have right now.
Thank you both. Well, where does the time go? We will now move on to a final closing statement from each candidate, and we'll begin with you, Mr. Brock.
5 times in Vermont history, the lieutenant governor has had to come in and step in quickly because of tragedy. Began with our first lieutenant governor who replaced our first governor in 1797, and most recently when Governor Dick Snelling died. When you go to the polls to elect a lieutenant governor, you're actually voting potentially also for a governor. And therein is what's important, is that the person elected to that role has to have the background, the experience, the judgment, the depth to be able to perform the role of governor if it should become necessary in the event of tragedy. In looking at each of us, I think you should look carefully at our backgrounds, at our experience, at the roles that we've played, the things that we've done, and also our belief in Vermont and Vermonters and where we need to go as a state. That's my focus, and that's why I ask for your vote on November the 8th. I want to do what's best for Vermont, and I want to make this a place where my family can continue to live and other families can as well. Thank you so much.
Mr. Zuckerman.
Thank you. As a representative and senator, I have worked with people throughout the state to move challenging legislation through our state house. Marriage equality, raising the minimum wage, GMO labeling. These are all issues, many of which passed when I was in the minority in the House or when there was a Republican governor. We made those things happen because we all worked together. As a husband, father, small business owner, I recognize the challenges that many Vermonters face. I released my tax returns months ago showing that I'm right in the middle, average Vermonter income. I know what it's like to run a business and be an average Vermonter and also try to make policy better for ordinary Vermonters. I'm going to bring more people into the process, and I'm very proud and pleased to have the endorsements of Senator Sanders, Senator Leahy, and Congressman Welsh. I'd be honored to have your support any day between now and November 8th. And I'd like you to look at my website, www.zuckerman4vt.com, for more information about the range of issues we discussed tonight, as well as other issues that we were unable to get to. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, and thanks to all of you. Come back tomorrow, same time, for the candidates for governor. I'm Stuart Ledbetter. For Stephanie, Brian, Leanne, and all of us here at ECHO and NBC5 News, thank you and good night.